Hi guys. Tonight we step into a world where half the population lived by rules they never agreed to, in houses they could not own, wearing clothes designed to remind them of their place. The year is 1862, and you are a woman in Victorian England. You have a name, a family, perhaps even a fortune, but the moment you married, all of it became his. Your money, your property, your children, even your body. Legally speaking, you barely exist. You probably wouldn't survive a week in this world. Not because you lack strength or intelligence, but because every hour of your day is governed by invisible rules so absurd, so suffocating, that modern minds can barely comprehend them. And the strangest part? Most people accepted these rules as natural, as right, as the way things had always been and always would be. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are now? Now, dim the lights. Let your breathing slow, and imagine yourself waking up in a cold bedroom in London. In a time when being born female meant being born into a gilded cage, the first thing you notice is the cold. Not the sharp, biting cold of the streets outside, but the damp, creeping chill that seeps through heavy curtains and settles into your bones. The fire in the grate has burned down to ash and ember, a faint orange glow that offers memory more than warmth. Your breath makes small clouds in the darkness. Somewhere in the house, a clock strikes 5. You lie still beneath layers of blankets and quilts, your body curled tight against the chill. The bed is large, too large for one person, really, with a canopy of dark velvet that blocks what little light creeps through the windows. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with horsehair and wool, lumpy in places, but familiar. You have slept in this bed for 7 years now, ever since your wedding night. When you were led into this room as a bride of 19 and told that this was your home now, your home. The words feel strange even after all this time, because in the eyes of the law, this house is not yours. The furniture, the curtains, the silver candlesticks on the mantelpiece, none of it belongs to you. Even the nightgown you are wearing, the one your mother embroidered with tiny roses before your wedding, is technically the property of your husband. This is the doctrine of coverture, a legal principle so deeply embedded in Victorian life that most people never think to question it. When a woman marries, her legal identity is absorbed into her husband's. She becomes, in the language of the law, covered by him. She cannot own property. She cannot sign contracts. She cannot sue or be sued. In the eyes of the court, she has become invisible. Historians still debate how strictly coverture was enforced in practice. Some argue that many husbands allowed their wives considerable informal control over household finances. Others point to countless cases of women left destitute when their husbands gambled away fortunes or simply walked out the door. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the messy middle, but the principle remained clear. A married woman was not a person. She was an extension of her husband, like a shadow or a sleeve. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Under coverture, if a woman committed a crime in the presence of her husband, she could sometimes claim that she was acting under his command and therefore not responsible. The law assumed she had no independent will. In theory, this could be used as a defense. In practice, it was simply another reminder that her choices, her actions, her very thoughts were considered subordinate to his. You hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Soft, careful steps your lady's maid. Probably. coming to light the fire and begin the long process of preparing you for the day. You have perhaps 10 more minutes of stillness before the rituals begin. 10 more minutes in this cold, quiet darkness where you can almost pretend you belong to yourself. The room smells of lavender and coal dust, old wool, and the faint mustiness of velvet that has hung too long without airing. If you concentrate, you can hear the house breathing around you, the creak of floorboards, the distant clatter of the kitchen coming to life, the low murmur of servants beginning their work. This is the hour when the house belongs to them, the invisible army of maids and cooks and footmen who keep the machinery of respectability running. Soon it will belong to your husband, who will descend to his study and his newspapers and his world of business and politics. And you will float somewhere in between, the mistress of a house you do not own, the manager of servants whose wages you cannot legally pay. But that is later. For now, there is only the cold and the dark and the sound of your own breathing. You think about your mother, who gave you advice on your wedding eve. She told you to be patient, to be pleasant, to remember that a husband's love must be earned through quiet obedience, not demanded through argument. She told you that marriage was a woman's highest calling, her truest purpose, and that any sacrifices you made would be repaid in the security of a home and the joy of children. She did not mention that those children would not legally be yours. She did not mention that your husband could send them away to school, to relatives, to anywhere he pleased, and you would have no right to object. Perhaps she did not know. Perhaps she knew and could not bear to say it. Perhaps she had made her peace with these rules so long ago that she no longer saw them as unfair, only as the way things were. The door opens, and a thin line of candlelight falls across the floor. Your maid enters quietly, a shadow carrying fire. She kneels by the grate and begins to coax the embers back to life, adding small pieces of coal, blowing gently until flames begin to lick at the edges. The room grows warmer. Degree by slow degree, another day is beginning. And already, before your feet have touched the cold floor, the rules are waiting for you, written by men who never wore corsets, who never lost their names at the altar, who never lay awake wondering if their children would remember them if they were sent away. The rules do not care if you agree with them. The rules do not ask your opinion. You push back the covers and sit up slowly. The cold air hits your skin like a whisper of warning. Your maid turns and curtsies, her face pale in the firelight. "Good morning, ma'am," she says. "Shall I fetch your tea?" You nod, because that is what you do. You nod, and you smile, and you begin again. The tea arrives in a china cup so thin you can almost see the light through it. You drink slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest while your maid moves about the room, laying out the clothes you will wear today. There are so many pieces, so many layers between your skin and the outside world. By the time you are fully dressed, you will be wearing somewhere between 15 and 20 pounds of fabric, and you will not be able to put on or remove any of it by yourself. This is not an accident. This is by design. You finish your tea and set the cup aside. The fire has grown stronger now, pushing back the chill, and the room glows with soft amber light. Your maid approaches with the first layer, a chemise of white cotton, soft from many washings. Falling to your knees, you raise your arms and let her slip it over your head. The fabric is cool against your skin, and you shiver slightly as it settles into place. This is the only layer that will touch your body directly, a thin barrier between you and everything that comes next. Next come the drawers split down the middle, for reasons of practicality that no one discusses in polite company. They tie at the waist with a simple ribbon. Then the stockings. White cotton held up by garters just above the knee. Your maid kneels to help you. Her fingers quick and efficient. She has done this 1,000 times. She could dress you in her sleep. And now the corset. You take a deep breath, your last full breath for the next 12 hours, and turn to face the mirror. Your maid lifts the corset from the bed. A construction of whalebone and cotton sateen, reinforced with steel busks down the front. It is a beautiful object. In its way, the fabric is a pale pink, almost the color of skin, with delicate stitching along the boning channels. It looks like something between armor and a cage. Perhaps that is exactly what it is. The corset wraps around your torso, and your maid begins to thread the laces through the eyelets at the back. You grip the bedpost with both hands, bracing yourself. This is the part that never gets easier, no matter how many years you have been doing it. She pulls the laces tight, and you feel your ribs compress, your waist narrowing, your breath growing shallow. The pressure is immense, not painful exactly, but relentless. There is no position that offers relief. There is only the constant, squeezing embrace of whalebone and steel. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. The average Victorian corset reduced a woman's lung capacity by somewhere between 20 and 30%. Some women fainted regularly. Others developed digestive problems, muscle atrophy, even displaced organs. Doctors at the time wrote extensively about the medical dangers of tight lacing, but their warnings were largely ignored. A small waist was the mark of a refined lady, and refinement was worth any price. Your maid pulls the laces tighter still, and you exhale slowly, forcing the air out of your lungs so she can close the gap another inch. The ideal waist measurement for a fashionable woman in the 1,860 seconds was somewhere between 18 and 22 inches. Your natural waist is 26 inches. Every morning, you erase 4 inches of yourself to meet the standard. Almost there. "Ma'am," your maid says, her voice slightly strained from the effort. You nod, because speaking requires breath, and breath is now a luxury. Historians still argue about how common extreme tight lacing really was. Some scholars believe that the tiny waists depicted in fashion plates were artistic exaggeration, that most women laced their corsets to a comfortable rather than punishing degree. Others point to surviving corsets with waist measurements of 16 or 17 inches, clearly designed for serious compression. The truth probably varied enormously depending on class, region, and personal vanity. But the principle remained constant. A woman's body was raw material to be shaped, molded, and disciplined into an acceptable form. The laces are tied off now, and your maid steps back to examine her work. You stand very straight, you have no choice. Really. The corset forces your spine into rigid alignment, and look at yourself in the mirror. Your waist curves inward dramatically, your bosom pushed up, your posture unnaturally perfect. You look elegant. You look refined. You look like a woman who has never run, never shouted, never taken a full breath of air without permission. Next comes the crinoline, that peculiar invention of the 1,850 seconds that has transformed the silhouette of respectable women everywhere. It is a cage of steel hoops connected by fabric tapes, designed to hold your skirts out in an enormous dome shape. Your maid helps you step into it, fastening it around your waist over the corset. You feel the weight settle onto your hips. The structure sways slightly as you move, the hoops bouncing gently against each other. Here is something they do not tell you in etiquette books. Crinolines are dangerous. Women have died wearing them. The wide skirts catch fire near open flames, the hoops feeding the blaze and making escape nearly impossible. Others have been caught in carriage wheels, dragged under machinery, knocked off cliffs by sudden gusts of wind. One physician in the 1,860 seconds estimated that crinoline-related accidents killed nearly 3,000 women per year in England alone. The number is probably exaggerated, but the danger was real. You have learned to move carefully, to keep your distance from fireplaces, to sit down with exquisite caution. Your clothing is trying to kill you. You have made your peace with this. Over the crinoline goes the petticoat white cotton, heavily starched, rustling with every step. Then another petticoat, this one quilted for warmth. Then the dress itself. A day dress of deep blue wool with a high collar and long sleeves. The bodice buttons up the front with 24 tiny covered buttons, each one requiring your maid's patient fingers to fasten. The skirt falls in heavy folds over the crinoline, sweeping the floor when you walk. You will spend the day dragging 6 feet of fabric behind you, collecting dust and mud and whatever else the world leaves in your path. Finally, the accessories. A cameo brooch at your throat, a simple gold wedding band on your finger, the ring your husband placed there 7 years ago, the ring that marked your transformation from person to property. Your hair is pinned up in a simple chignon, neat and respectable. Later, for evening, it will be elaborated with curls and ribbons and perhaps a small ornament. For now, simplicity will do. You turn slowly before the mirror, examining yourself from every angle. The woman who looks back at you is impeccable. Not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in the fabric, not a single visible sign of the flesh and blood creature trapped inside all these layers. You have been dressed, you have been packaged, you are ready to face the day. The whole process has taken nearly an hour. Tomorrow, you will do it all again. Your maid curtsies and withdraws to tidy the room, and you stand alone for a moment, breathing shallowly, feeling the press of whalebone against your ribs. Somewhere downstairs, you can hear the sounds of breakfast being prepared. The smell of toast and bacon drifts up through the floorboards. Your stomach growls softly, but you ignore it. A lady does not rush to the table. A lady waits until she is summoned. You smooth your skirts one final time and move toward the door. The stairs creak beneath your feet as you descend, one hand trailing along the banister, the other holding your skirts clear of your shoes. Walking in a crinoline is an art form you have spent years perfecting. You must glide rather than stride, keeping your movements smooth and controlled so the steel hoops do not sway too wildly. You must turn sideways to pass through narrow doorways. You must never, ever sit down without first checking what is behind you, because the cage has a habit of flipping up in the most embarrassing ways. The dining room is on the ground floor, at the back of the house where the morning light falls soft and grey through tall windows. You pause at the doorway, composing your face into pleasant neutrality. Before entering, your husband is already seated at the head of the table. He is a man of 43, neither handsome nor ugly, with the comfortable paunch of someone who has never missed a meal. His whiskers are neatly trimmed, his collar freshly starched, his attention entirely absorbed by the newspaper spread before him. He does not look up as you enter. He does not need to. He knows you will be there. You are always there. "Good morning," you say, your voice soft and pleasant. He grunts in response. Turning a page, you take your seat at the opposite end of the table, a distance of perhaps 8 feet. though it might as well be 8 miles. Between you stretches an expanse of white linen, silver cutlery, and bone china. A footman appears at your elbow with a pot of tea. Another brings toast, butter, marmalade. A third sets down a covered dish of eggs and bacon, the smell rising warm and savory into the air. You eat slowly, carefully, in small bites that will not strain your corset. A lady never appears hungry. A lady never wolfs her food like a common labourer. You cut your toast into precise squares and chew each one thoroughly, your eyes fixed on your plate. Across the table, your husband eats with considerably more enthusiasm, the sounds of his chewing clearly audible in the quiet room. He reads aloud as he eats, sharing items from the newspaper that he finds interesting. You listen, or pretend to listen, nodding at appropriate moments. He does not ask for your opinion on the political situation in France. He does not inquire whether you have thoughts about the new railway legislation. He reads, and you receive. And this is how information flows in a respectable household from him to you, never the reverse. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. In many Victorian households, husbands and wives ate their breakfast from opposite ends of very long tables, specifically to discourage conversation. The distance was considered proper, a mark of formality and respect. Intimacy was reserved for the bedroom, and even there, as we shall see, it followed rigid rules. The dining table was a stage for performance, not connection. You played your role, he played his, and somewhere in the middle, a marriage existed in theory if not in warmth. The Americans are making trouble again. Your husband announces, rattling the paper, some nonsense about tariffs. How tiresome, you murmur, because that is what you are supposed to say. He grunts again, apparently satisfied, and returns to his reading. You think about the things you cannot say. You think about the article you read last week secretly, in a magazine borrowed from your sister, about a woman named Barbara Bodichon who is campaigning for married women's property rights. You think about the questions that keep you awake at night. Why should your inheritance belong to him? Why should the money you brought to this marriage be his to spend as he pleases? Why should you have to ask permission to buy a new dress with funds that were once yours? But you do not say any of this. You smile, and you nod, and you eat your toast in small, ladylike bites. Historians still debate how much freedom Victorian wives actually had within their marriages. Some scholars point to letters and diaries that reveal warm, affectionate partnerships where husbands consulted their wives on major decisions. Others highlight the grim statistics, the women trapped in abusive marriages with no legal means of escape, the wives committed to asylums on their husband's authority alone, the mothers who lost everything in divorce and never saw their children again. The law gave husbands almost unlimited power. How they chose to use that power varied enormously. You have been lucky, in your way. Your husband is not cruel. He is merely indifferent. The footman refills your teacup, and you wrap your fingers around the warm china, grateful for the small comfort. The tea is strong and sweet, exactly as you like it. This, at least, the servants know. They have learned your preferences over 7 years of silent observation, the temperature of your bath water, the flowers you prefer in your bedroom, the particular way you like your eggs prepared. They know you better than your husband does. They see you more clearly than he ever will. Your husband finishes his breakfast and folds his newspaper with a decisive snap. He pushes back his chair and stands, brushing crumbs from his waistcoat. I shall be at the club until dinner, he says. Do not wait up. Of course. You reply, "Have a pleasant day." He nods, already turning away, his mind on whatever business awaits him in the world outside. The world you cannot enter, the world of politics and commerce, of clubs and coffee houses, of conversations that matter and decisions that shape history. He walks out the door and into that world as easily as breathing. You remain behind. In the world of drawing rooms and calling cards, of embroidery and etiquette, of silence. The door closes. His footsteps fade down the hall. A moment later, you hear the front door open and shut, and then there is only quiet. You sit alone at the long table, surrounded by the remains of breakfast. The eggs have gone cold on your plate. The tea is cooling in your cup. Somewhere in the kitchen, servants are already preparing for luncheon, for tea, for dinner, the endless cycle of meals that structure your days and give them the illusion of purpose. Here is something that no etiquette book will teach you. Loneliness has a taste. It tastes like cold tea and silence. It tastes like words swallowed before they can reach your tongue. It tastes like mornings that stretch into afternoons, that stretch into evenings. Each one identical to the last. Each one requiring you to smile as though you are perfectly content. You finish your tea and rise from the table, your skirts whispering against the floor. There is much to be done today, or rather, there is much to be supervised, which is not quite the same thing. You will meet with the cook to discuss menus. You will review the household accounts. You will write letters, receive visitors, perhaps take a walk in the park if the weather permits, and a suitable companion can be found. But first, you must retreat to your morning room, that small sanctuary at the back of the house where a lady is permitted to be almost alone with her thoughts. The breakfast dishes will be cleared by hands you barely notice. The dining room will be swept and polished until it gleams. And tomorrow morning, you will sit in the same chair, at the same table, listening to the same voice read from the same newspaper. This is your life now. This is what forever looks like. The morning room is yours. This is what they tell you. Anyway, that this small, sun-filled space at the back of the house belongs to you, is meant for you, has been decorated to suit your feminine sensibilities. The wallpaper is a soft green, patterned with tiny roses. The furniture is delicate, curved, upholstered in pale silk. There is a writing desk by the window, a small bookcase filled with approved volumes, a work basket overflowing with embroidery silks. Everything is pretty. Everything is small. Everything whispers that the person who belongs here is ornamental rather than essential. You settle into your chair, a process that requires gathering your skirts, checking the position of your crinoline, and lowering yourself slowly to avoid any undignified bouncing of hoops. The cushion sighs beneath your weight. From here, you can see the garden through the window, a square of green and grey beneath the pale morning sky. A gardener is raking leaves in the far corner, his breath making clouds in the cold air. He moves freely, easily, his body unencumbered by steel and whalebone. You watch him for a moment, feeling something that might be envy. Your morning room, your domain, your cage. The geography of a Victorian house is carefully divided along invisible lines of gender. The study belongs to your husband. You may enter only when invited. And even then you feel like a trespasser among the leather chairs and cigar smoke. The dining room is shared territory. But he sits at the head of the table and you at the foot, and the distance between you is measured in more than feet. The drawing room is for receiving guests, the parlour for formal occasions, the library for quiet reading, though the books you are permitted to read are carefully curated to exclude anything too stimulating. And then there is the nursery, That bittersweet kingdom on the upper floor where your children spend their days with nurses and governesses. You visit them there, of course. You kiss their foreheads and hear their lessons and tuck them into bed at night. But even that space is not truly yours. It belongs to the servants who run it, and to your husband who pays for it, and to the children themselves who will one day grow up and leave you behind. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Many Victorian architects designed houses with separate staircases for men and women, ensuring that the mistress of the house could move from her bedroom to her morning room without ever encountering her husband's guests or business associates. The intention was propriety, of course protecting delicate female sensibilities from the rough world of commerce. But the effect was isolation. You could live in the same house as your husband and go entire days without crossing his path. You pull your work basket closer and extract an embroidery hoop. The fabric stretched across it is fine white linen, half covered with a design of bluebells and ivy. You have been working on this piece for 3 months now. You will probably work on it for 3 months more. There is no urgency. There is never any urgency. The stitching is something to do with your hands while the hours crawl past like elderly snails. The needle moves through the fabric with a soft, rhythmic sound. In, out, in, out. The silk thread gleams in the pale light. Blue for the flowers, green for the leaves, white for the highlights that make them seem almost real. You are good at this. You have had years of practice. After all, years of sitting in rooms very much like this one, making beautiful things that no one needs. Historians still debate the purpose of feminine accomplishments in Victorian society. Some argue that skills like embroidery, watercolor painting, and piano playing were genuine art forms, outlets for creativity in lives otherwise constrained by rigid expectations. Others suggest they were primarily displays of leisure, proof that a family was wealthy enough to support a wife who did nothing productive. The cynical view holds that these accomplishments were simply ways to keep women busy, to fill their hours with harmless activities that posed no threat to the existing order. Perhaps all three interpretations are true. Perhaps it depends on the woman. You set down your embroidery and flex your fingers, working out the stiffness. Through the wall, you can hear the faint sounds of the household continuing its work, footsteps on stairs, the distant clatter of pots in the kitchen, the murmur of servants' voices. You are surrounded by activity, yet separate from it. The mistress of the house does not cook or clean or carry water. The mistress of the house sits in her morning room and does decorative things with her hands. There is a small clock on the mantelpiece, its face painted with shepherdesses and lambs. It tells you that only 45 minutes have passed since breakfast. The day stretches ahead of you like an empty road, and you must fill it somehow without doing anything improper, anything unladylike, anything that might suggest you have a mind that craves more than embroidery and morning calls. You could read, of course. The bookcase offers several improving volumes, sermons, poetry of the gentler sort, a novel or two that your husband has approved. Nothing political, nothing philosophical, nothing that might give you ideas above your station. You remember the governess you had as a girl, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Pringle, who once told you that education was wasted on women because their brains were smaller and their temperaments unsuited to serious thought. You believed her then. You are not sure you believe her now. But it hardly matters what you believe. The books available to you have already been selected by someone else. Here is something that might make you smile. If you let it, there is a lady in London, a Mrs. Jameson, who has written extensively about art and travel and history, subjects that proper ladies are not supposed to understand. Her books are scandalous, in a quiet sort of way. Your sister owns several of them, hidden behind more respectable volumes on her shelves. You borrowed one once, a study of Italian painters, and read it in secret over the course of a week. It made you feel alive in a way that embroidery never has. It also made you feel terribly sad. Because the world misses. Jameson described a world of beauty and ideas, and passionate engagement seemed as distant as the moon. The clock ticks on. The gardener finishes his raking and disappears around the corner of the house. A coal fire burns in the small grate, hissing and popping softly. The room smells of lavender and beeswax, clean and faintly floral, the approved scent of feminine domesticity. You pick up your embroidery again and continue stitching, the needle moving automatically while your mind wanders elsewhere. You think about the rooms you cannot enter, the club where your husband spends his evenings, drinking brandy and discussing politics with other men, the coffee houses where gentlemen read newspapers and debate the issues of the day, the offices and courtrooms and parliamentary chambers where decisions are made that shape your life without your input. You are not allowed in any of these places. You are not even allowed to walk past some of them without a chaperone. The world is full of doors that are closed to you, and you must pretend that you do not notice, that you do not care, that the morning room is enough. The bluebell takes shape beneath your fingers, petal by careful petal. Outside, the clouds shift and a thin ray of sunlight falls across your lap, warming the silk threads to gold. This is your kingdom. This is your empire. 4 walls and a window and an embroidery hoop. It will have to be enough. The embroidery can wait. There are letters to write. You move to the writing desk by the window, settling yourself onto the narrow chair with practiced care. The desk is a pretty thing, all polished rosewood and brass fittings, with a slanted surface for writing and small drawers for paper, ink, and sealing wax. Your stationery is cream-colored, edged with a thin line of blue. Your married initials embossed in the corner. Everything about it announces your status: respectable, refined, belonging to someone. The morning post has already been delivered. A small stack of letters arranged neatly on a silver tray. You sort through them with quick fingers. An invitation to a dinner party next week. A note from your sister, her handwriting familiar and dear. A letter from the dressmaker confirming your appointment for a fitting. And beneath these, the household accounts bills from the butcher, the grocer, the coal merchant, all requiring your attention. This is the invisible labor of a Victorian wife. You do not cook the meals, but you must plan them. You do not clean the house, but you must ensure it is cleaned. You do not pay the servants, but you must manage their wages, their schedules, their disputes and complaints. You are the silent engine that keeps the household running. Yet none of this work is recognized as work. It is simply what women do. It is simply expected. You take up your pen and dip it in the inkwell, the familiar scratch of nib against paper filling the quiet room. First, the dinner invitation you must accept. Of course, because your husband has already indicated he wishes to attend. You compose a brief, gracious reply, your handwriting neat and slanting in the approved feminine style. Then a longer letter to your sister, full of the small details of daily life that women share with each other. The new curtains you are considering for the drawing room. The funny thing the baby said yesterday. The mild headache that has been troubling you since Tuesday. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Victorian letter writing was governed by elaborate rules of etiquette. The quality of your paper, the color of your ink, the style of your handwriting. All of these communicated subtle messages about your breeding and social position. Black-edged paper indicated mourning. Colored paper was considered vulgar. Crossing your lines, writing horizontally, then turning the page and writing vertically over the same space was acceptable for intimate correspondence, but improper for formal letters. You learned these rules as a girl, absorbed them until they became instinct, and now you follow them without thinking. The coal merchant's bill catches your eye, and you frown slightly. The amount seems higher than last month. Despite the mild autumn weather, you make a note to discuss this with the housekeeper later. These are the details that fill your days: the cost of candles, the quality of the beef, the character references of potential servants, important work, in its way, essential work, and yet, legally, none of this is yours to manage. The money you spend on household expenses comes from an allowance your husband provides. The bills are paid in his name. If you were to earn money yourself, though respectable married women do not work, those earnings would belong to him automatically. This is the law. This is coverture in practice. You are the manager of a household you do not own, spending money that is not yours, making decisions that can be overruled at any moment by a man who barely notices the work you do. Historians still debate how much practical autonomy Victorian wives actually exercised within these legal constraints. Some scholars point to household management books of the era, which treat the mistress of the house as a kind of domestic executive, responsible for budgets, staffing, and strategic planning. Others note that this authority existed entirely at the husband's pleasure. He could withdraw it at any time, demand an accounting of every penny, or simply hand the management over to a housekeeper if he found his wife's efforts unsatisfactory. The power was borrowed, not owned, and borrowed power can always be taken back. You finish the letter to your sister and set it aside to dry. The ink gleams wetly in the pale light, your words captured in blue-black lines across the cream paper. You have not told her about the argument last week, the one where your husband questioned your household accounts and implied that you had been careless with his money. You have not mentioned the cold silence that followed, lasting 3 days. You have not described the way you lay awake at night, staring at the canopy above your bed, wondering what would happen if he decided you were not competent to manage his household anymore. These are not things women write about. These are not things women discuss. You smile, and you manage, and you keep the machinery running, and you never, ever admit that the machinery sometimes feels like it is grinding you to dust. The housekeeper knocks softly at the door, and you call for her to enter. She is a sturdy woman in her 50s, Mrs. Brennan, with grey hair pinned severely beneath her cap and an expression of permanent, mild disapproval. She has worked in this house for 20 years, longer than you have been married, and sometimes you suspect she considers you an interloper in her domain. The menus for the week. "Ma'am," she says, handing you a sheet of paper. "And cook wishes to know if you'll be wanting the lamb or the beef for Thursday's dinner." You review the menus carefully, making small adjustments: fewer potatoes, more greens, a lighter dessert for Sunday when your digestion is always troublesome. These are the decisions that fall to you, the tiny choices that accumulate into the texture of daily life. Lamb or beef, white sauce or brown, candles in the drawing room or oil lamps in the study. You are the curator of domestic comfort, the architect of invisible ease. The lamb. "I think," you say, "and please remind cook that my husband prefers his vegetables well done." Mrs. Brennan nods, her face betraying nothing, and withdraws. You are left alone again with your letters and your accounts, and the soft ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. The fire crackles in the grate. A carriage passes in the street outside. The clip-clop of hooves fading into the distance. You look down at the household bills spread across your desk. The butcher, the grocer, the wine merchant, the dressmaker. Each one represents a decision you made, a small exercise of judgment in a life that allows you so little scope for judgment, and yet none of these bills bear your name. None of these merchants would extend you credit without your husband's guarantee. In the eyes of the law, you are not a person who can owe money or be owed money. You are a shadow, managing shadows. You gather the bills into a neat stack and place them in the drawer for later review. There will be time this afternoon, after the morning calls are finished, to sit with the account books and make everything balance. There is always time. Time is the one thing you have in abundance. The letter to your sister is dry now. You fold it carefully, seal it with a drop of red wax, and set it aside for the afternoon post. The clock strikes 11, and it is time to venture out. You rise from your writing desk and smooth your skirts, preparing yourself for the elaborate ritual of leaving the house. This is not a simple matter of putting on a coat and stepping through the door. This is a production, a performance, a careful navigation of rules so numerous and so strict that a single misstep could cost you everything. You cannot go alone. This is the first and most important rule. A respectable married woman does not walk the streets of London without company. It does not matter that you are 30 years old, that you have managed a household for 7 years, that you are perfectly capable of putting one foot in front of the other without assistance. The world outside your front door is dangerous, not physically, necessarily, but socially. A woman alone is a woman vulnerable to gossip, to speculation, to the slow poison of reputation damage that can destroy a life as surely as any disease. Your lady's maid will accompany you today. She is already waiting in the hall, dressed in her neat grey uniform, a basket over her arm for any small purchases you might make. She is your shadow, your witness, your proof of respectability. As long as she walks 3 steps behind you, the world will know that you are a proper lady going about proper business. Without her, you would be something else entirely, something suspect, something shameful, something that makes other women cross to the other side of the street. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. The rules about chaperonage varied enormously, depending on a woman's age, marital status, and social class. An unmarried girl required the strictest supervision. She could not be alone with a man for even a moment without risking her reputation. A married woman had slightly more freedom, but only slightly. Widows occupied a strange middle ground, simultaneously pitied and suspected, and working-class women, of course, had no chaperones at all, which is precisely why respectable society considered them morally compromised by definition. You descend the stairs and pause in the entrance hall while the footman helps you into your outdoor things. First, a mantle of dark blue wool lined with silk, heavy enough to ward off the autumn chill. Then gloves, always gloves, because a lady's bare hands must never be exposed in public. Then a bonnet, tied beneath your chin with satin ribbons, its brim framing your face and limiting your peripheral vision. You can only see what is directly in front of you now. The world has narrowed to a tunnel. The footman opens the door, and the outside air rushes in cold, damp, smelling of coal smoke and horse dung and the peculiar metallic tang of London fog. You step onto the front stoop and pause for a moment, adjusting to the noise and bustle of the street. Carriages rattle past. Street vendors call their wares, somewhere nearby. A dog is barking. The city is alive with movement and sound, and you are about to enter it wrapped in layers of wool and whalebone. Moving at a pace dictated by your corset and your crinoline and the watchful eyes of everyone you pass, your maid falls into step behind you, and you begin to walk. The rules of walking are precise and unforgiving. You must move at a moderate pace, never rushing, which would be undignified, but never dawdling, which might suggest you are loitering for improper purposes. You must keep your eyes forward, your expression pleasant but neutral. You must not stare at shop windows too long, or pause to watch street performers, or show too much interest in anything that might distract from your purposeful progress. You are not a tourist. You are not a flâneuse. You are a respectable woman going about respectable business, and you must look the part. You must not speak to men. This rule is absolute. If a gentleman tips his hat to you, someone you know from your husband's circle, perhaps you may nod in acknowledgement, but you must not stop to converse. If a stranger addresses you, you must ignore him completely, as though he does not exist. To engage would be to invite speculation. To smile would be to encourage impropriety. The streets are full of dangers that have nothing to do with crime and everything to do with perception. Historians still debate how rigidly these rules were actually enforced in practice. Some scholars argue that middle-class women had considerably more freedom of movement than etiquette books suggest, that the rules were aspirational rather than descriptive. Others point to diaries and letters that reveal the genuine anxiety women felt about navigating public space. The constant awareness of being watched and judged. The truth, as always, probably varied depending on the neighborhood, the time of day, and the individual woman's circumstances, but the anxiety was real. The consequences of transgression were real, and so you walk carefully, measuring each step. A group of young men passes on the opposite side of the street, laughing loudly about something. You do not look at them. You keep your eyes fixed on the pavement ahead, your face arranged in that pleasant, neutral expression that gives nothing away. One of them glances in your direction, you can feel it. That prickling awareness of being observed, but you do not acknowledge him. You are a statue. You are a ghost. You are a woman who has learned to move through the world without leaving any impression that might be used against her. Your destination is a house 3 streets away, where you will leave your calling card with a lady you met at a dinner party last month. This is how social connections are maintained in your world, through an elaborate system of visits and cards that follows rules as complex as any legal code. You must call between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. You must leave your card with the servant even if the lady is home, unless she specifically asks to receive you. You must return calls within a week, or risk giving offense. You must never call on someone above your social station unless they have called on you first. The fog thickens as you walk, blurring the edges of buildings and muffling the sounds of the street. Your boots click against the wet pavement. Your skirts drag through the grime, collecting a dark hem of London mud that will require brushing when you return home. Everything about this excursion is difficult: the weight of your clothes, the tightness of your corset, the constant vigilance required to navigate both the physical and social obstacles in your path. And yet, there is something almost pleasant about being outside. The air, despite its pollution, feels fresher than the stuffy warmth of your morning room. The movement, despite its restrictions, is better than sitting still. You pass a flower seller on the corner, her basket bright with chrysanthemums and late roses, and for a moment you consider stopping to buy a small bouquet. But your maid is watching, and the flower seller is watching, and somewhere behind a curtained window a neighbor might be watching too. You walk on, leaving the flowers behind. You arrive at the house on Belgrave Street and pause at the bottom of the steps. Composing yourself, the facade is handsome white stucco, black railings, a polished brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. The windows are curtained in heavy velvet, revealing nothing of the life within. This is the home of Mrs. Ashworth, a woman you have met exactly twice, and today you will leave your card with her servant and probably never see her face at all. This is how friendship works in your world. Slowly, formally, through layers of paper and protocol, your maid waits at the bottom of the steps while you climb to the front door. You lift the brass knocker and let it fall once, twice, the sound echoing in the quiet street. A moment passes. Then the door opens, and a butler appears, his face professionally blank. "Good morning," you say, producing your calling card from the small silver case in your reticule. "Is Mrs. Ashworth at home?" The butler takes your card and examines it briefly. Your name is printed in elegant script, not your own name. Of course, but your husband's name with Mrs. attached. You surrendered your name at the altar, along with everything else. "I shall inquire, madame," he says, and disappears into the dim interior. You wait on the doorstep, the cold seeping through your gloves. This is the moment of uncertainty that attends every morning call. The lady may receive you, in which case you will be ushered into her drawing room for 15 minutes of carefully choreographed conversation. Or she may be not at home, a polite fiction that means she does not wish to see visitors today, or does not wish to see you specifically, and you will never know which. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. The Victorian calling card was a sophisticated communication device, capable of conveying messages far beyond a simple name. The corners of the card could be folded in specific ways to indicate different purposes. A folded upper right corner meant the visit was made in person. A folded lower right corner expressed condolences. A folded lower left corner meant farewell before a long journey. Some ladies kept elaborate records of cards received, tracking the social obligations they owed and were owed with the precision of accountants. The butler returns, his expression unchanged. "Mrs. Ashworth will receive you." "Madam," a small victory. You follow him into the entrance hall, surrendering your mantle and gloves to a waiting maid, and are led through a corridor lined with portraits to the drawing room at the back of the house. The room is decorated in the fashionable style, heavy furniture, dark wallpaper, surfaces crowded with ornaments and photographs, and the accumulated evidence of respectable prosperity. Mrs. Ashworth rises from her chair as you enter, a smile fixed on her face. "Mrs. Crawford, how delightful," she says, extending both hands in greeting. "I was just thinking of you this morning." She was not thinking of you. You both know this. But the fiction must be maintained, the ritual observed. "Mrs. Ashworth, you are too kind," you reply. Taking her hands briefly before settling into the chair, she indicates, "I hope I find you well." And so it begins. The dance of pleasantries, the exchange of approved topics, the careful navigation of a conversation in which almost nothing of substance can be said. You discuss the weather, which has been unseasonably mild. You discuss a recent concert, which you both attended but did not enjoy. You discuss the health of mutual acquaintances, the prospects of the social season, the shocking cost of good servants these days. Mrs. Ashworth pours tea from a silver pot, and you accept a cup, holding it delicately by the handle. never wrapping your fingers around the bowl no matter how cold your hands might be. Historians still debate the purpose of these elaborate social rituals. Some scholars argue that morning calls serve genuine functions: networking, information exchange, the maintenance of social bonds that could prove valuable in times of need. Others see them as primarily performative, a way for women to display their mastery of etiquette and their worthiness of inclusion in respectable society. The cynical view holds that they were simply a way to fill time, to give idle women something to do with their empty hours. Perhaps all three interpretations contain some truth. Mrs. Ashworth is telling you about her daughter's piano lessons, which are progressing nicely, and you nod and smile and make appropriate sounds of interest. You do not mention that your own daughter is too young for lessons, or that you sometimes worry about what kind of education she will receive, or that you lie awake at night, wondering whether she will grow up to sit in drawing rooms just like this one, having conversations just like this one, feeling the same quiet desperation that you have learned to hide so well. These are not things women discuss. These are not things women admit to feeling. The clock on the mantelpiece chimes the quarter hour, and you know your time is almost up. A morning call should last between 15 and 20 minutes, long enough to be polite, short enough to avoid overstaying your welcome. You have mastered the art of watching clocks without appearing to watch them, of timing your departure to the minute. I really must be going, you say, setting down your teacup with a gentle click. I have several other calls to make this morning. This is a lie. You have no other calls. You will go home and sit in your morning room and wait for lunch. But the fiction must be maintained. Mrs. Ashworth rises with you, her smile never wavering. It has been such a pleasure. You must come again soon. And do give my regards to Mr. Crawford. Always the husband. Always the reminder that you exist in relation to him, that your social position derives from his, that your presence in this drawing room is permitted only because you wear his ring and bear his name. I shall certainly do so. You say, "Good morning, Mrs. Ashworth." The butler appears to escort you out. You retrieve your mantle and gloves, button yourself back into your outdoor armor, and step onto the front stoop. The fog has thickened while you were inside, wrapping the street in grey gauze. Your maid materializes at your elbow, faithful shadow, and you begin the walk home. 15 minutes. That is what you have accomplished. 15 minutes of tea and small talk, of smiles that mean nothing and words that say less. You have maintained a social connection. You have demonstrated your respectability. You have performed the role of a proper lady, hitting every mark, following every rule. And now you will go home and do it all again tomorrow, with a different lady in a different drawing room, having the same conversation about the same approved topics. The streets are quieter now. The midday lull settling over the city. A lamplighter passes, checking his equipment for the evening rounds. A nursemaid pushes a perambulator, her young charges bundled in wool against the cold. Ordinary people going about ordinary business, and you among them, invisible in your respectability. You think about Mrs. Ashworth, alone now in her drawing room, waiting for her next visitor. You wonder if she feels it too, the emptiness beneath the performance, the hunger for something more than weather and servants and the proper way to fold a calling card. But you will never ask, and she will never tell. The walk home takes you past a bookshop, its windows bright with new volumes stacked in tempting pyramids. You slow your pace without meaning to, your eyes drawn to the titles displayed behind the glass. There is a history of the Roman Empire, thick and serious in its leather binding, a collection of essays on political economy, a treatise on natural philosophy, promising to explain the mysteries of electricity and magnetism, books full of ideas, full of arguments, full of the kind of knowledge that makes a person feel alive. You cannot buy any of them. Not because you lack the money your household allowance would cover a book or two, but because these are not books for ladies. These are books for men, for minds that are built to handle serious thought. Your mind, you have been told since childhood, is not built for such things. Your mind is delicate, easily overwhelmed, prone to hysteria if overtaxed. Your mind is suited for watercolors and French conversation, for music and embroidery, for the pretty accomplishments that make a woman charming without making her threatening. You walk on, leaving the bookshop behind, but the hunger stays with you. Your education ended when you were 17. This is not unusual. Most girls of your class finish their schooling around the same age, pronounced ready for the marriage market. Their minds stuffed with just enough knowledge to be interesting at dinner parties and not a scrap more. You learn to play the piano. Though not well enough to perform professionally, you learn to sketch landscapes. Though not well enough to exhibit, you learned French and a little Italian. Enough to read simple novels and conduct polite conversation with foreign visitors. You learn to dance, to curtsy, to enter a room gracefully and exit it without causing offense. What you did not learn could fill libraries. Your brother, 4 years your senior, attended Oxford. You remember the day he left for university, his trunk packed with books and ambition, your father clapping him on the shoulder and telling him the world was his to conquer. He studied classics and law, philosophy and history. He read Plato in the original Greek, debated politics in the college common room, stayed up late arguing about ideas that mattered. He came home during holidays full of opinions, full of fire, full of the certainty that his thoughts deserved to be heard. You stayed home and practiced your scales. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Many Victorian educators believed that serious study could physically damage women. Dr. Edward Clark, an American physician whose ideas were influential on both sides of the Atlantic, argued that intellectual exertion diverted blood from the reproductive organs to the brain, potentially causing infertility, nervous collapse, and a host of other ailments. Girls who studied too hard, he warned, risked becoming mannish, sickly, and unfit for motherhood. Better to keep their minds gently occupied with accomplishments than to risk destroying their most essential function. You think about this sometimes, when you are sitting in your morning room with nothing but embroidery to occupy your thoughts. You think about all the blood that is supposedly flowing to your womb instead of your brain, keeping you healthy and fertile and stupid. You wonder if the doctors truly believe this, or if it is simply a convenient excuse to keep women in their place. Historians still debate how many Victorian women actually accepted these limitations on their education. Some scholars point to the thriving market for serious literature among female readers, suggesting that women were hungry for intellectual stimulation regardless of what doctors recommended. Others note that many mothers actively discouraged their daughters from academic pursuits, having internalized the belief that education made women unmarriageable. The system perpetuated itself, generation after generation, each mother teaching her daughter the same lessons of limitation she had learned herself. You arrive home and surrender your outdoor things to the waiting footman. The house is quiet. Your husband still at his club, the servants going about their invisible work. You climb the stairs to your morning room and sit down heavily in your chair, the crinoline bouncing slightly before settling into stillness. On the shelf beside your desk, there is a small collection of books that belong to you, truly belong to you. Purchased before your marriage with your own money. A volume of poetry by Tennyson. A novel by Charlotte Bronte. Its pages soft from many readings. A book of essays by Margaret Fuller. Smuggled into your possession by a sympathetic aunt who believed that women deserved more than they were given. These books are your secret treasures, the evidence that your mind is capable of more than it has been allowed to attempt. You take down the Margaret Fuller and open it at random, letting the pages fall where they will. Your eyes land on a passage you have read many times before. Let them be sea captains. If you will, Fuller is writing about women, about the arbitrary limits placed on their ambitions, about a world where half the population is told from birth that their dreams must be small. Let them be sea captains. The idea is so radical, so absurd, that it makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. You close the book and return it to its shelf, hiding it behind the more respectable volumes where your husband will not notice it. He would not approve of Margaret Fuller. He would not approve of the questions her words plant in your mind, growing like weeds in the cracks of your carefully maintained composure. The clock strikes noon, and soon the luncheon gong will sound. You will go downstairs and eat a small meal in the dining room. Alone at the long table, the empty chair at the head reminding you of your husband's absence. You will return to your morning room afterward and work on your embroidery, or write more letters, or simply sit and watch the afternoon light move across the walls. This is your life. This is what your education prepared you for: endless hours of refined idleness, broken only by social rituals and household management. You are accomplished, as they say. You can paint a tolerably pretty watercolor and play a simple sonata and conduct a conversation in French without embarrassing yourself. You are exactly what your governess trained you to be, what your mother expected you to become, what society demands of respectable women. And yet there is a voice in your head that will not be silent, a hunger that will not be satisfied, a suspicion that you were made for something more than this. You look at the bookshop windows and you want. You listen to your husband read the newspaper aloud and you want. You sit in drawing rooms full of women discussing servants and weather and you want, desperately, to talk about something that matters. But wanting is not having. And in your world, women are not supposed to want at all. The luncheon gong sounds, distant and hollow. You rise from your chair, smooth your skirts, and arrange your face into its usual pleasant mask. Downstairs, a meal is waiting. A meal you did not cook, served on dishes you do not own, in a house where even your hungriest thoughts must stay hidden. Luncheon is a quiet affair. Cold meats, bread, a salad of winter greens. You eat alone at the long table, the silence broken only by the soft footsteps of the footman refilling your water glass. The food is good, your cook is competent, if unimaginative, but your appetite is small. The corset presses against your stomach, a constant reminder not to indulge, not to fill yourself too completely, not to take up more space than you are allowed. Afterward, you return to your morning room and try to read, but the words swim before your eyes. There is a heaviness in your chest that has nothing to do with the whalebone, a restlessness in your limbs that embroidery cannot soothe. You have felt this way before. Many times this formless discontent, this sense that something is wrong without being able to name what it is. Your mother used to call it nerves. Your husband calls it your delicate constitution. The doctor has another word for it entirely: hysteria. You first heard the diagnosis 3 years ago. After a particularly difficult winter, the baby had been colicky, crying through the night for weeks on end. Your husband had been traveling for business, leaving you alone with the servants and the screaming infant and the endless grey days. You stopped sleeping. You stopped eating properly. You found yourself weeping at odd moments, overcome by waves of sadness that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Your husband, when he returned, was concerned enough to summon the physician. Dr. Hartley arrived with his black bag and his air of professional authority, examined you briefly, and delivered his verdict with the confidence of a man who has never been doubted in his life. Hysteria, a wandering womb, an excess of feminine emotion that had overwhelmed your fragile system. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. The word hysteria comes from the Greek hystera, meaning uterus. For centuries, doctors believed that the womb could move around inside a woman's body, pressing against other organs and causing all manner of symptoms: anxiety, irritability, fainting, insomnia, loss of appetite, excessive appetite, too much emotion, too little emotion. Virtually any complaint a woman might have could be attributed to her wayward uterus. The diagnosis was convenient, comprehensive, and almost impossible to disprove. Dr. Hartley prescribed rest, complete rest. He emphasized no reading, no writing, no stimulation of any kind. You were to lie in a darkened room for several weeks, eating bland food and seeing no visitors. Your mind, he explained, had been overtaxed by the demands of motherhood. It needed time to recover its natural equilibrium. Too much activity, too much thought, too much engagement with the world, and you risked permanent damage to your already fragile nervous system. You followed his instructions because you had no choice. Your husband agreed with the doctor, of course he did. Why would he question another man's expertise? And the household was rearranged to accommodate your treatment. You lay in your darkened bedroom for 3 weeks, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of life continuing without you. The baby was cared for by the nurse. The household was managed by the housekeeper. Your existence was subtracted from the equation, and everything went on exactly as before. By the end of the 3 weeks, you felt worse than when you started. The isolation had deepened your sadness rather than lifting it. The enforced idleness had made your thoughts spiral inward, chasing themselves in endless anxious circles. But when Dr. Hartley returned to examine you, you smiled and told him you felt much improved. You had learned by then that disagreeing with doctors only proved how sick you really were. Historians still debate the true nature of what Victorian physicians called hysteria. Some scholars argue that many of these women were suffering from conditions we would now recognize as depression, anxiety, or postpartum disorders, real illnesses that required real treatment, not rest cures and condescension. Others suggest that hysteria was often a rational response to impossible circumstances, a way for women to express distress when all other avenues of expression were closed to them. The body speaks when the voice is silenced. The womb wanders when the woman cannot. You think about this sometimes, when the heaviness settles in your chest and the world seems wrapped in grey gauze. You think about all the women lying in darkened rooms across England, diagnosed with hysteria, treated with rest and isolation and the removal of everything that might have given their lives meaning. You wonder how many of them were truly ill, and how many were simply exhausted by the effort of being female in a world that offered them so little. The afternoon sun slants through the window, casting long shadows across the floor of your morning room. You pick up your embroidery but do not stitch, holding the hoop loosely in your lap while your mind wanders. There is a consultation scheduled for next week, Dr. Hartley again, for your regular examination. He will ask about your spirits, your sleep, your appetite. He will press his fingers to your wrist and count your pulse. He will peer into your eyes and ask you to describe your monthly courses in terms that make you blush. And then he will deliver his verdict. And your husband will nod seriously. And whatever treatment is prescribed will be implemented without anyone asking whether you agree. Here is something they do not tell you about being a woman in your world. Your body is not your own. It belongs to doctors who probe and prescribe without your consent. It belongs to your husband, who has legal access to it whenever he chooses. It belongs to the children you bear, who drain it of strength and shape it to their needs. It belongs to the corset that molds it, the crinoline that cages it, the endless layers of fabric that hide it from view. You live inside this body, but you do not own it. You are a tenant, not a proprietor. The fire crackles softly in the grate. Outside, a carriage passes. The sound of hooves muffled by the fog. You set aside your embroidery and lean back in your chair. Closing your eyes, the heaviness is still there, pressing against your ribs. But you have learned to breathe around it. You have learned to carry it quietly, invisibly, like all the other burdens that respectable women are not supposed to acknowledge. Dr. Hartley will come next week, and you will smile and tell him you are well. You will answer his questions and submit to his examination and accept whatever prescription he offers. You will be a good patient, a cooperative patient, a patient who understands that doctors know best. And afterward, when he has gone, you will sit in your morning room and feel the heaviness settle back into place, familiar as an old friend, constant as the ticking of the clock. This is what wellness looks like for women like you. This is the only version of health you are permitted to have. The clock strikes 2. The afternoon stretches ahead, empty and full at the same time. You open your eyes and reach for your embroidery, the needle finding its rhythm almost without thought. In, out, in, out. The silk thread catches the light. You are fine. You are always fine. The clock strikes 4, and the tea things are brought in. This is the hour when women gather, when drawing rooms across London fill with the rustle of silk and the gentle clink of porcelain. Your own drawing room is ready, the fire built up, the curtains drawn against the fading afternoon light, the best china arranged on the sideboard. Today you are receiving visitors, and 3 ladies have sent word that they will call. They arrive within minutes of each other, shedding mantles and bonnets in the entrance hall, their cheeks pink from the cold. Mrs. Palmer, a neighbour whose husband works in the same firm as yours. Lady Ashton, older and grander, whose presence is a mark of social favour. And Miss Crane, a spinster of 40 who lives with her elderly mother and speaks very little but observes everything. You greet them with practised warmth, guiding them to the comfortable chairs arranged near the fire. The maid pours tea strong and dark, sweetened with sugar from the silver bowl, and offers plates of small sandwiches, their crusts carefully removed. Everything is exactly as it should be. Everything is perfect. Such dreadful weather we've been having. Mrs. Palmer begins, accepting her cup with a graceful nod. I thought the fog would never lift this morning. And so the conversation begins, flowing along its familiar channels. The weather, the difficulty of finding good servants, the shocking price of coal this winter. These are the approved topics. the safe harbors where female conversation is permitted to anchor. You contribute your share of observations and complaints. Your voice pleasant. Your expression interested. Your mind wandering to places the conversation cannot follow. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Afternoon tea as a formal social institution was invented by Anna, Duchess of Bedford, sometime in the 1842. Before that, the long gap between luncheon and dinner, often 8 hours or more, left fashionable ladies hungry and irritable. The Duchess began requesting tea and small cakes in her private rooms during the afternoon, and soon the practice spread throughout aristocratic circles and trickled down to the middle classes. What began as a practical solution to hunger became an elaborate ritual, governed by its own set of rules and expectations. Lady Ashton is speaking now, her voice carrying the particular authority that comes with rank and age. She is discussing a young woman you have never met, the daughter of a family in Mayfair, who has apparently done something scandalous. They say she was seen walking alone in the park. Lady Ashton says, lowering her voice to a stage whisper, after dark, without even a maid. The other women make sounds of shock and disapproval. Mrs. Palmer shakes her head slowly. Miss Crane's eyes widen behind her spectacles. Her mother must be devastated. You murmur, because something is expected of you. Devastated and ruined. Lady Ashton confirms. No respectable man will have her now. One moment of foolishness, and her future is destroyed. You sip your tea and think about this unnamed girl, walking alone through the park in the gathering darkness. Was she meeting someone, running away from something? Or did she simply want, for one brief moment, to feel the night air on her face without someone watching her every step? You will never know. What you know is that her life is over now, not because she committed any crime, not because she harmed anyone, but because she was seen, because someone noticed, because the rules apply to women with the force of law, even when the law itself is silent. Historians still debate how often Victorian women were actually ruined by minor breaches of etiquette. Some scholars argue that the system was more forgiving than it appeared, that families closed ranks and memories faded and disgraced, women eventually found their way back into society. Others point to the countless women who ended up in poverty, prostitution, or the workhouse after a single misstep. Real women whose names have been lost to history, whose lives were genuinely destroyed by gossip and scandal. The fear was certainly real. Whether or not the consequences were always as severe as people believed, the conversation drifts to other topics. A new novel that everyone is reading, though no one will admit to enjoying it too much. A concert series at the Hanover Square Rooms. The engagement of a mutual acquaintance's daughter to a man of good fortune but uncertain temperament. You listen and nod and contribute when required. Navigating the treacherous waters of female social interaction, because that is what this is. Beneath the pleasant surface, treacherous waters, every word you speak is being evaluated. Every opinion you express is being filed away for future reference. These women are your friends, in the limited sense that your world allows, but they are also your judges and your jury. One wrong word, one breach of propriety, and the same lips that smile at you now will whisper about you later. You think about the unnamed girl in the park, and you wonder who betrayed her. A neighbor watching from a window? A servant with a grudge? Perhaps another woman. Someone who smiled at her over teacups just like these, who kissed her cheek and called her friend, and then destroyed her with a single well-placed piece of gossip. The fire crackles, and the clock ticks, and Lady Ashton moves on to another scandal. Another fallen woman, Another cautionary tale to remind you all of what happens when the rules are broken. More tea, you ask? Reaching for the pot, the ladies extend their cups, and you pour, the dark liquid steaming in the cool air. Outside, the afternoon is dying, the grey light fading toward evening. Soon your visitors will leave, returning to their own homes, their own husbands, their own carefully maintained respectability. You will be left alone in the drawing room, surrounded by empty cups and crumbs, the echo of gossip hanging in the air. Miss Crane catches your eye across the room, a brief, unreadable glance that might be sympathy or warning or nothing at all. She is the quietest of your visitors, the one who speaks least and observes most. You wonder sometimes what she thinks. This woman who never married, who lives in a kind of social limbo that is neither respectability nor ruin. You wonder if she is lonely. You wonder if she is free. But you do not ask. You never ask. The clock strikes 5, and your visitors begin making their farewells. You smile and nod and say all the right things, and one by one they disappear into the foggy evening. The tea things are cleared away. The fire burns low. Silence returns. The nursery is on the 3rd floor, at the top of a narrow staircase that winds upward past the guest bedrooms and the servants' quarters. You climb it now, your skirts gathered in one hand, the other trailing along the banister. The sounds of the house fade as you ascend the clatter of the kitchen, the murmur of servants, the distant rumble of the street. Up here, the world grows quieter, softer, wrapped in the particular hush that belongs to children. You pause at the nursery door, listening. From inside comes the low voice of the nursemaid, singing a lullaby you remember from your own childhood. The melody is sweet and sad. Something about a mockingbird and a looking-glass. Promises made to a baby who cannot understand them. You push the door open gently and step inside. The nursery is warm, a fire burning steadily in the grate. The walls are papered with a pattern of rabbits and roses, chosen by you during your first pregnancy. When everything seemed full of hope and possibility, 2 small beds stand against the far wall. Your daughter, Eleanor, who is 5, and your son, William, who is 3. They are both awake, sitting on the carpet near the fire, while the nursemaid mends a torn pinafore. "Mama," Eleanor says, scrambling to her feet and running toward you. You bend down to catch her, breathing in the smell of her hair, soap and milk, and something indefinably sweet that belongs only to children. William follows more slowly, his thumb in his mouth, his eyes heavy with approaching sleep. You gather them both close, one in each arm, feeling their small bodies warm against yours. This is the best part of your day. This is the only part that feels entirely real. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Despite the cult of motherhood that dominated Victorian culture, the endless celebration of maternal love, the reverent depictions of Madonna and child mothers had almost no legal rights over their own children. Under English common law, children were the property of their father. He decided where they lived, how they were educated, whom they could see. If a marriage ended, the father kept the children automatically, regardless of his character or conduct. A mother could be separated from her babies and have no legal recourse whatsoever. You try not to think about this as you hold Eleanor and William close. You try not to imagine what would happen if your husband decided, for whatever reason, to send them away, to boarding school, to relatives in the country, to anywhere he pleased, without consulting you, without requiring your permission, without even informing you until it was done. It has happened to other women. You know their stories. Whispered in drawing rooms and hinted at in letters. Women whose husbands took their children out of spite, out of cruelty, out of simple indifference to maternal feeling. Women who spent years petitioning courts that had no power to help them. Women who never saw their children again. The nursemaid rises and curtsies, then quietly withdraws to give you privacy. You settle onto the floor with your children, your crinoline billowing around you like a deflated balloon, and listen as Eleanor tells you about her day. She found a beetle in the garden. She learned to count to 50. She drew a picture of a horse, though it looks more like a dog, and she wants to show you. You admire the picture with appropriate enthusiasm. You help William build a tower of wooden blocks, then watch with exaggerated dismay as he knocks it down, giggling with delight. These are the moments you live for, the small, ordinary intimacies of motherhood that no one paints in portraits or celebrates in poems. The beetle stories, the block towers, the weight of a sleepy child in your arms. Historians still debate how much time Victorian mothers actually spent with their children. Some scholars argue that wealthy women were largely absent from their children's daily lives, leaving the work of feeding and bathing and comforting to nurses and governesses. Others point to diaries and letters that reveal deep maternal involvement. Mothers who visited the nursery multiple times a day and agonized over every childhood illness. The truth probably varied enormously depending on the individual family, but the legal reality remained constant. No matter how devoted a mother might be, she had no rights that could override her husband's will. Eleanor yawns, her eyelids drooping. You lift her gently and carry her to her bed, laying her down on the soft mattress and pulling the blankets up to her chin. She is so small, so fragile, so utterly dependent on adults who may or may not have her best interests at heart. You brush the hair from her forehead and kiss her gently. Sleep well, my darling. You whisper, Mama loves you. William is already half asleep on the carpet, his thumb still firmly in his mouth. You carry him to his own bed, tucking him in with the same care, the same whispered words. The nursemaid returns to take up her post in the corner, and you stand for a moment between the two small beds, watching your children drift toward dreams. They are yours. You grew them inside your body, fed them from your breast, walked the floor with them through countless sleepless nights. You know the sound of their laughter, the smell of their skin, the particular weight of them in your arms. They are more yours than anything else in this world. And yet, legally, they are not yours at all. You think about Caroline Norton, the society beauty, who became a crusader for mothers' rights after her husband took her children and refused to let her see them. Her case was famous or infamous, depending on who was telling the story, and her campaigning eventually led to the Custody of Infants Act, which gave mothers the right to petition for custody of children under 7. A small victory. A crack in the wall. But only a crack. The wall still stands. You bend to kiss each sleeping child one more time, breathing in their warmth, memorizing the curve of their cheeks. Then you turn and walk quietly from the nursery, closing the door behind you with a soft click. The staircase stretches downward into the darkening house. Somewhere below, your husband will soon be returning from his club. Dinner will be served. The evening rituals will begin. But for now, for this one moment, you stand alone on the landing, your heart full of love and fear in equal measure. The evening dress is heavier than the day dress. This is the first thing you notice as your maid lifts it from the wardrobe, the fabric falling in rich folds of deep crimson silk. It is beautiful. This dress, you chose it yourself from a pattern book last season. spent hours with the dressmaker, discussing trimmings and alterations, but beautiful things are often heavy, and tonight you will carry this weight for hours. First, the corset must be tightened. You grip the bedpost again, just as you did this morning, and brace yourself. Evening dress requires a smaller waist than daytime attire, an inch smaller, perhaps two. Your maid unlaces the back, adjusts the busk, and begins pulling the laces with renewed determination. The pressure around your ribs increases, squeezing the breath from your lungs in slow increments. You exhale carefully, creating space for the whalebone to close, and feel your body reshape itself once more. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Some Victorian women owned multiple corsets for different occasions. A morning corset for everyday wear, a riding corset for horseback, an evening corset for formal events, designed to push the waist even smaller and the bosom even higher. The truly fashionable might change corsets 3 or 4 times in a single day, each one molding the body to match the demands of the moment. You own only 2 day and evening, but the difference between them is enough. The evening corset settles into place, and you take a moment to steady yourself. Your breath comes shallow now. Each inhale a small victory against the steel and bone that binds you. The maid helps you into fresh petticoats, layers of silk and crinoline that will support the weight of the gown. Then the dress itself, lowered over your head like a crimson cloud, buttoned up the back with 24 tiny hooks that require patience and nimble fingers. You turn to face the mirror and see a stranger looking back. The woman in the glass is elegant, polished, every inch a lady of quality. Her waist curves impossibly inward. Her shoulders gleam white above the low neckline. Her hair has been repinned and ornamented with small pearls that catch the candlelight. She looks like a painting, like a doll, like something created for display rather than for living. This is the point. Of course. Tonight you will attend a dinner party at the Havertons' house, and your appearance will reflect upon your husband. You are his ornament, his proof of prosperity, his silent advertisement to the world that he is a man of means and taste. The dress, the jewels, the careful arrangement of your hair, all of it exists to make him look good. Your maid fastens a necklace around your throat, a string of garnets that belong to your grandmother. The stones are cool against your skin, their weight familiar and somehow comforting. Earrings follow, and a bracelet, and a ring for your right hand that matches the garnets. You are being armored, piece by piece, prepared for battle in the endless war of social performance. Historians still debate how much agency Victorian women exercised in their self-presentation. Some scholars argue that fashion was a form of expression, a way for women to communicate taste, status, and personality within the narrow confines of respectability. Others see it as pure constraint, a system designed by men to limit women's movement, restrict their breathing, and remind them constantly of their ornamental status. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps you can find freedom in a cage, if you learn to decorate the bars beautifully enough. Your husband is waiting in the drawing room. You descend the staircase slowly, partly for dignity, partly because your corset makes rapid movement impossible, and find him standing by the fireplace, already dressed in his evening clothes. He looks distinguished in black and white, his waistcoat gleaming with subtle embroidery, his watch chain catching the light. He glances up as you enter, his eyes moving over your appearance with the practiced assessment of a man examining a purchase. "Very nice," he says, and that is all. You accept the compliment with a small nod. You have spent 2 hours preparing for this moment, bathing, dressing, having your hair arranged, submitting to the painful ritual of the evening corset, and very nice is what you receive in return. But you did not expect more. You have learned not to expect more. The carriage is waiting outside. Your husband helps you in, a process that requires careful management of your skirts to avoid crushing the crinoline. You settle onto the velvet seat, arranging the crimson silk around you, and the carriage lurches into motion. The streets pass by the window, dark and foggy, punctuated by the yellow glow of gas lamps. Here is something no etiquette book will teach you. There is a particular loneliness that comes from sitting beside someone who does not see you. Your husband is inches away, close enough to touch, and yet the distance between you might as well be measured in miles. He stares out his window, you stare out yours. The carriage sways and rattles. Neither of you speaks. You think about the girl you were at 19, standing at the altar in your white dress, full of hope and romantic dreams. You believed that marriage would bring companionship, partnership, a meeting of minds and hearts. You believed that your husband would be your closest friend, your confidant, your ally against the world. No one told you that marriage could be the loneliest place of all. The Havertons' house blazes with light as the carriage pulls up. Windows glow golden in the darkness, and the sounds of music and laughter drift out into the night. You take a deep breath, as deep as your corset allows, and prepare yourself for the performance ahead. Your husband descends first and offers his hand to help you down. You take it, feeling the brief pressure of his fingers, and step onto the pavement. The cold air bites at your bare shoulders, but you do not shiver. Ladies do not shiver. Together, you climb the steps to the front door. His arm is beneath your hand, solid and formal, connecting you in the eyes of the world. You are Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, a respectable couple arriving at a respectable party. And no one looking at you would guess how empty the space between you really is. The door opens, and warmth and light spill out to greet you. You smile and step inside. The dining room is a symphony of candlelight and silver. Long tables stretch beneath crystal chandeliers, their surfaces crowded with flowers, glassware, and the gleaming evidence of wealth. You are seated in the middle of the table, exactly where a woman of your status belongs, not at the head, where the host presides, not at the foot, where the hostess manages, but somewhere in the comfortable obscurity of the center, surrounded by other wives, other ornaments, other women whose names will not be remembered when the evening is recounted tomorrow. The gentleman on your right is discussing shipping routes. The gentleman on your left has opinions about the railway. You turn your head from one to the other, nodding at appropriate moments, your face arranged in an expression of polite interest. This is your role tonight: to listen, to encourage, to make these men feel that their thoughts are fascinating and their words worth hearing. You must not disagree. This is the first rule of dinner party conversation. Even if the gentleman beside you says something foolish, something wrong, something that makes you want to argue, you must smile and nod and perhaps murmur a gentle question that allows him to elaborate further. A woman who disagrees is disagreeable. A woman who argues is unpleasant. A woman who knows more than the men around her is a threat to the natural order of things. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Many Victorian etiquette books explicitly instructed women to hide their intelligence at social gatherings. A lady should never make a gentleman feel inferior. They warned. She should ask questions rather than offer opinions. She should guide the conversation with a light hand, ensuring that the men around her felt brilliant and witty and thoroughly pleased with themselves. Her own brilliance, if she possessed any, should remain carefully concealed. The soup course arrives, a clear consommé that trembles slightly in its porcelain bowl. You lift your spoon and take a small sip, careful not to slurp, careful not to tip the bowl toward you, careful to observe all the tiny rules that govern the eating of soup in polite society. The gentleman on your right pauses his monologue about shipping long enough to consume his portion in 3 efficient spoonfuls. You are still working on your first when the footman comes to clear. You must not eat too much. This is the second rule. A lady's appetite should be delicate, restrained, almost non-existent. The dinner table groans with food, fish and meat and vegetables, sauces and savories and sweets, but you must pick at each course as though you are barely interested, as though your body requires almost nothing to sustain itself. The corset helps with this. Of course, there is simply no room for indulgence when your stomach is compressed to half its natural size. The fish course comes and goes. The meat course arrives, a roast of beef, pink and glistening, carved at the sideboard by a footman with practiced skill. You accept a small portion and eat it slowly, cutting each bite into tiny pieces before lifting them to your mouth. Around you, the men eat heartily, their appetites unrestrained by whalebone or expectation. The women pick and nibble, performing their dainty indifference to food. Historians still debate whether Victorian women were genuinely less hungry than their male counterparts, or whether they simply learned to ignore their hunger as part of the performance of femininity. Some scholars point to the medical literature of the era, which often described women as naturally requiring less sustenance than men. Others note the practical reality of tight lacing, which made large meals physically uncomfortable, if not impossible. The truth is probably some combination of both, biology twisted by culture, appetite reshaped by expectation, until women no longer knew what their bodies actually wanted. The conversation flows around you like a river around a stone. Politics, business. The latest news from Parliament, subjects that women are not supposed to understand and certainly not supposed to discuss. You listen with half an ear, absorbing more than anyone suspects, filing away information that you will never be permitted to use. Your husband is down the table, deep in conversation with another man, and you watch him for a moment, the way he gestures with his fork, the way he laughs at something you cannot hear. He looks happy. He looks alive. He looks like a person who belongs in the world. You look down at your plate and push a piece of beef from one side to the other. The lady across from you catches your eye and smiles, a small, conspiratorial smile that seems to acknowledge something unspoken. She is older than you, perhaps 45, with silver threading through her dark hair and lines around her eyes that speak of laughter or sorrow or both. You do not know her name, but you recognize something in her expression, a weariness, a knowing. Here is something that etiquette books do not mention: the silent communication between women at events like these. The glances that say, "I see you." The small gestures that acknowledge the shared absurdity of sitting in expensive dresses, eating tiny bites of food, pretending to be fascinated by men who barely notice you exist. There is a sisterhood in these moments, fragile and unspoken, the only solidarity available to women who are supposed to compete with each other for male attention. The dessert course arrives, a towering confection of cream and spun sugar that draws murmurs of appreciation from the table. You accept a small portion and pretend to eat it, moving your spoon through the sweetness without actually consuming very much. Your corset protests even this modest indulgence, the pressure against your stomach making each bite feel like a small rebellion. Finally, mercifully, the meal ends. The hostess rises, signaling that it is time for the ladies to withdraw, and you rise with the others, leaving the men to their port and cigars and conversation that matters. The rustle of silk fills the room as a dozen women make their way toward the door, a procession of color and constraint, moving together toward the drawing room, where you will wait until the men decide they are ready to join you. The door closes behind you, and suddenly the air feels different, lighter, somehow freer. The men are in there, doing whatever men do when women are not watching, and you are out here, with nothing to do but wait. You find a seat near the fire and settle into it, your skirts arranging themselves around you in a pool of crimson silk. The waiting begins. The men join you eventually, smelling of cigar smoke and brandy, their faces flushed with the particular satisfaction that comes from conversation without female supervision. They drift into the drawing room in twos and threes, finding seats near wives or wandering toward the piano where a young woman has been persuaded to play. The music is soft and pleasant, filling the spaces between conversations, providing a backdrop for the final act of the evening's performance. Your husband finds you near the fire and takes the seat beside you. He does not speak, merely settles into the cushions with a small sigh of contentment. You can smell the port on his breath, the rich tobacco that clings to his coat. He has had a good evening. You can tell by the looseness in his shoulders, the ease in his expression. Whatever was discussed over cigars has left him pleased with himself and the world. You do not ask what they talked about. You know you would not receive a real answer. The drawing room hums with activity now. Small groups form and reform, conversations starting and stopping like summer rain. A card table has been set up in the corner, and several gentlemen are settling in for a game. The young woman at the piano finishes her piece to polite applause and is replaced by another, this one less skilled but equally determined. You watch it all with the detached observation of someone who has seen this scene 100 times before. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. The separation of men and women after dinner was a distinctly Victorian innovation. In earlier eras, the sexes mingled more freely throughout the evening, but by the middle of the 19th century, it had become customary for women to withdraw while men remained behind to drink, smoke, and discuss matters too serious or too vulgar for feminine ears. The practice reinforced the idea that men and women inhabited different spheres, different worlds, different realities that overlapped only at carefully controlled moments. A gentleman approaches Mr. Thornton, a friend of your husband's, a man you have met perhaps half a dozen times. He bows politely and asks if you would care to take a turn about the room. You glance at your husband, who nods almost imperceptibly, granting permission. You rise and take Mr. Thornton's arm, and together you begin a slow circuit of the drawing room. This is acceptable. One turn about the room with a gentleman who is known to your husband, in full view of the assembled company, with no possibility of private conversation. This is proper. This is safe. But you are careful. You are always careful. You speak of neutral topics, the music, the dinner, the flower arrangements that Mrs. Haverton has chosen for the occasion. You smile and nod and keep your voice pleasant. Never too warm. Never too interested. You are aware of eyes upon you, other women watching, measuring, judging. One turn about the room is acceptable. 2 would be noticed. 3 would be remarked upon. And if you were to dance with Mr. Thornton later, when the rugs are rolled back and the music grows livelier, you must be careful not to dance with him more than twice, or tongues will begin to wag. Historians still debate how rigidly these social rules were actually enforced. Some scholars argue that respectable women had more freedom than etiquette books suggest, that the rules were guidelines rather than laws. Others point to the genuine terror that many women felt about their reputations, the knowledge that a single misstep could lead to social death. The rules may have been unwritten, but the consequences were real. You complete your circuit and return to your husband's side, releasing Mr. Thornton's arm with a polite nod of thanks. He bows and withdraws, moving on to speak with someone else, and you settle back into your chair as though nothing has happened, because nothing has happened. A walk around a drawing room, a few words about flowers, and yet your heart is beating slightly faster, your awareness heightened by the knowledge that you were being watched, being evaluated, being judged. This is the double standard that governs your world. Your husband may go where he pleases, do as he likes, speak to whomever he chooses. There are places in London, clubs and houses and establishments, that respectable women pretend not to know about, where men go to find pleasures that marriage does not provide. Everyone knows these places exist. No one speaks of them directly, and no man's reputation suffers for visiting them. But you must be above suspicion. You must be careful with your glances, your words, your steps across a drawing room floor. A woman's reputation is a glass vessel, easily shattered, impossible to repair. One careless moment, one misinterpreted gesture, and the whispers begin. And once they begin, they never stop. Here is something that keeps you awake some nights. Staring at the canopy above your bed, you do not know where your husband goes when he says he will be at his club. You do not know what he does during those long evenings when you sit alone in your morning room, embroidering flowers that no one needs. You have heard rumors about other husbands, whispered stories about mistresses and music halls and worse. You do not know if those stories apply to your own marriage. You have never asked. You are not sure you want to know. What you know is this: if you were to do the same, if you were to form an attachment outside your marriage, to seek comfort in another's arms, you would lose everything. Your reputation, your place in society, your children. The law would side with your husband, as the law always does. The courts would call you an adulteress, a fallen woman, a creature unfit for decent company. You would be cast out, and no one would take your part. This is the bargain you made at the altar. Though no one explained the terms to you at the time, the music changes, something slower and sweeter, and you lean back in your chair, letting the sound wash over you. Your husband sits beside you, solid and silent, his eyes half closed. Around you, the party continues, laughter and conversation, and the gentle clink of glasses. It is a pleasant scene, a picture of respectable society at its finest. You are part of this picture. You are trapped inside it. The clock on the mantelpiece shows 10:30. Soon it will be time to leave, to bundle into the carriage, to ride home through the dark streets and prepare for bed. Tomorrow will bring another day of rules and performances, another endless circuit of morning rooms and drawing rooms and dinner tables. But for now, you sit quietly beside your husband, your hands folded in your lap, your face arranged in its customary pleasant expression. The music plays on. The carriage ride home is quiet. The streets are nearly empty now. The respectable citizens of London tucked into their beds, the gas lamps casting pools of yellow light on the wet cobblestones. You sit beside your husband, your skirts taking up most of the seat. The silence between you thick and familiar. He stares out the window. You stare at your gloved hands. The house is dark when you arrive, save for a single lamp left burning in the entrance hall. The footman has waited up to receive you. his face professionally blank despite the late hour. He helps you down from the carriage and opens the front door, and you step inside, into the warmth and quiet of your home. Your husband follows, shedding his coat and hat, handing them to the footman without a word. He pauses at the bottom of the stairs and looks at you a long, considering look that you have learned to read over 7 years of marriage. "Don't be long," he says, and begins to climb. You stand in the entrance hall for a moment, listening to his footsteps recede. The house settles around you, creaking softly, breathing in its sleep. Somewhere above, a door opens and closes. Your husband has gone to his dressing room, where his valet will help him out of his evening clothes. Soon he will go to your shared bedroom and wait. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Under Victorian law, a husband had unlimited access to his wife's body. There was no such thing as marital rape. The concept did not exist in legal terms. When a woman married, she was considered to have given permanent consent to her husband's demands. She could not refuse. She could not resist. Her body, like her property and her children, belonged to him. Your maid is waiting in your dressing room, sleepy but patient. She helps you out of the crimson gown, unlaces the evening corset, removes the layers of petticoats and crinoline until you stand in nothing but your chemise. The relief of breathing freely is almost painful. Your ribs expanding into space they have not occupied for hours. You take deep breaths, filling your lungs, feeling your body remember its natural shape. The nightgown is white cotton, soft and simple, buttoned to the throat. Your maid brushes out your hair, the long strokes soothing against your scalp, and plats it into a loose braid for sleeping. You watch yourself in the mirror, a pale woman in white, her face tired, her eyes shadowed. You look older than you feel. You feel older than you are. "That will be all," you say, and your maid curtsies and withdraws. You are alone now, in the quiet of your dressing room, with only the ticking of the clock for company. Through the connecting door, you can hear your husband moving about in the bedroom, the creak of the mattress as he settles into bed, the rustle of sheets being arranged. He is waiting. Historians still debate how Victorian women experienced marital intimacy. Some scholars point to letters and diaries that suggest genuine affection and pleasure between spouses. Others note the medical literature of the era, which often described women as naturally passionless, enduring rather than enjoying physical relations. The truth, as always, probably varied enormously from marriage to marriage. Some women loved their husbands. Some feared them. Some felt nothing at all, a kind of practiced numbness that made the nights endurable. You think about your wedding night. 7 years ago. You were 19. Innocent. Knowing almost nothing about what marriage would require of you. Your mother had offered a few vague words of advice: lie still. Think of England. It will be over soon, but nothing that prepared you for the reality. You remember the darkness of the unfamiliar bedroom, the weight of your husband's body, the strange mixture of pain and confusion and shame. You remember lying awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was what love was supposed to feel like. It got easier. Over time, your body learned what was expected of it. You learned to be elsewhere in your mind while your body performed its duties. You learned to make the right sounds, the right movements, to signal compliance without actually feeling anything at all. This is a skill that many wives develop: the art of absence, the ability to leave your body behind while your thoughts drift somewhere safe and far away. Here is something that no one tells young brides. You can survive almost anything if you learn to be somewhere else while it happens. You take a deep breath, smooth your nightgown, and open the connecting door. The bedroom is dim, lit only by a single candle on the nightstand. Your husband is already in bed, propped against the pillows, watching you enter. The sheets are turned down on your side. A silent invitation. You cross the room slowly, your bare feet cold against the floorboards, and climb into bed beside him. He reaches for you, and you let yourself be reached for. His hands are familiar after all these years, the weight of them, the particular way they move. You close your eyes and let your thoughts drift upward, toward the ceiling, toward the sky, toward anywhere but here. The candle flickers, the bed creaks. The clock on the mantelpiece continues its steady ticking, measuring out the minutes until this will be over and you can sleep. This is your duty. This is what you promised at the altar, though no one spoke the words aloud. To love, honor, and obey. To be available, to surrender the sovereignty of your own body to another person's will. The law does not recognize your right to refuse. The church does not acknowledge your right to resist. And so, you do not refuse. You do not resist. You lie still and think of other things, the children sleeping upstairs, the embroidery waiting in your morning room, the book you are reading, the garden in spring, and you wait for it to be over. Afterward, your husband rolls away and is asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and even. You lie beside him in the darkness, staring at the canopy above the bed, feeling the slow return of your body to your own possession. The sheets are cool against your skin. The house is silent. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell strikes midnight. Another day has ended. Another night has been survived. You close your eyes and wait for sleep to come. Sleep does not come easily. You lie in the darkness, listening to your husband's breathing, feeling the warmth of his body beside you without touching it. The house is silent now, wrapped in the particular stillness that belongs to the small hours of the night. No servants moving through the halls, no carriages rattling past outside, only the occasional creak of old timbers settling, and the distant chime of a clock marking the passage of time. Your mind will not rest. It circles and wanders, touching on the events of the day, the morning calls, the tea, the dinner party, the endless performance of respectability before drifting further into dangerous territory. You think about the life you are living, the rules you are following, the invisible walls that surround you on every side, and you think about the women who have refused to accept those walls. There is a writer named George Eliot whose novels you have read in secret, borrowed from your sister's hidden collection. Her real name is Mary Ann Evans, and she lives openly with a man who is not her husband, a scandal that would destroy any ordinary woman. Yet she continues to write, continues to publish, continues to matter in a world that should have rejected her long ago. Her books are brilliant and fierce, full of women who struggle against the limitations of their lives. When you read them, you feel seen in a way that nothing else provides. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Many of the most successful female writers of the Victorian era used male pen names to protect their reputations and ensure their work would be taken seriously. Charlotte Bronte wrote as Currer Bell, Emily as Ellis Bell, Anne as Acton Bell. The Bronte sisters understood that a book written by a woman would be judged differently than one written by a man dismissed as emotional, frivolous, unsuitable for serious consideration. By hiding their gender, they could speak freely. By becoming invisible as women, they could finally be seen as artists. You wonder sometimes what you would write, if you had the courage. What stories live inside you, waiting to be told? What thoughts circle in your mind during those long hours of embroidery and morning calls? Thoughts you can never speak aloud, perhaps nothing of value, perhaps everything. You will never know, because you will never try. The risk is too great, the cost of failure too high. But other women have tried. Other women are trying still. You have heard whispers about them, the suffragists. They are called women who gather in parlors and meeting halls to discuss impossible things. The right to vote, the right to own property, the right to exist as full citizens under the law. These women write pamphlets and give speeches and march in the streets, demanding what has never been given willingly. They are mocked in the newspapers, denounced from pulpits, dismissed as hysterics and troublemakers, and yet they persist. Historians still debate how widespread support for women's suffrage actually was during this period. Some scholars argue that the movement was small and marginal, dismissed by most respectable women as radical and unseemly. Others point to the growing network of activists and sympathizers, the petitions with thousands of signatures, the slow accumulation of support that would eventually, decades from now, achieve what seems impossible today. The seeds are being planted, the ground is being prepared. You think about Barbara Bodichon, whose pamphlet you read years ago, arguing that married women should have the right to own property. You think about Josephine Butler, who campaigns against laws that punish women for sins that men commit with impunity. You think about Florence Nightingale, who defied her family to become a nurse and emerged a hero. These women looked at the rules and said no. They looked at the walls and began, slowly, to tear them down. Could you do the same? Could you stand up at a meeting and speak your mind? Could you write a pamphlet? Sign a petition? March in the street? The thought is terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. You imagine yourself stepping outside the boundaries of respectability, becoming one of those women that other women whisper about. You imagine the freedom of it and the cost. Your husband stirs beside you, mumbling something in his sleep, and you hold very still until he settles again. The candle has burned out, and the room is completely dark now. You cannot see the ceiling above you, cannot see your own hand if you raised it before your face. The darkness is absolute, pressing against your eyes like velvet. Here is something you have never admitted to anyone, not even yourself. There is a fire inside you that has never been allowed to burn, a wanting, a hunger, not for comfort or security or the approval of others, but for something larger, meaning, purpose, the chance to matter in a world that tells you daily that you do not. This fire has been banked and smothered since childhood, covered with ashes of duty and expectation, but it is still there. You can feel it sometimes, glowing faintly in the dark places of your heart. Perhaps that fire will never be allowed to burn freely. Perhaps you will live and die within these walls, following these rules, playing this part until the final curtain falls. Perhaps you will be buried beside your husband in the family plot, your gravestone bearing his name, your life summarized in a few words: beloved wife and mother, faithful and true, but perhaps not. Perhaps there will come a moment a year from now, a decade, a lifetime when the rules will loosen their grip. Perhaps your daughter will grow up in a world slightly less constrained than this one. Perhaps your granddaughter will vote, will own property, will walk alone through the streets without fear of ruin. Perhaps the fire inside you will be passed down, ember to ember, generation to generation, until someone finally lets it blaze. You do not know what the future holds. No one does. But lying here in the darkness, listening to your husband breathe, you allow yourself to hope. Not for yourself. Hope for yourself feels too dangerous, too likely to shatter, but for the women who will come after, for the daughters and granddaughters who will inherit this world and, perhaps, remake it. The fire glows faintly, the darkness presses close, and somewhere, in a meeting hall you will never enter, women are gathering to dream of freedom. You close your eyes. And finally, sleep begins to come. The night deepens around you, soft and slow. You drift in that strange space between waking and sleeping, where thoughts lose their edges and time becomes uncertain. The darkness is no longer oppressive, it is gentle now. A blanket rather than a cage. Your body sinks into the mattress, heavy with exhaustion. Finally released from the demands of the day. The corset is gone. The performance is over. For these few hours, you belong only to yourself. The house breathes around you, old and familiar. The creak of settling timbers, the whisper of wind against the windows, the distant sound of a carriage passing in the street below, hooves muffled by fog. These are the sounds of the world continuing without you. Asking nothing, expecting nothing, you can rest now. You have done everything that was required. Here is a curious detail that historians love to mention. Sleep was one of the few experiences that Victorian women and men shared equally. No matter how rigid the rules of the day, how sharp the divisions between the sexes, night brought a kind of democracy, rich and poor, man and woman, master and servant, all surrendered to the same darkness, the same dreams, the same temporary freedom from the waking world. In sleep, the rules dissolved. In sleep, everyone was equal. Your thoughts drift backward through the day, touching lightly on each moment before letting it go. The morning room with its pale green walls, the calling cards and teacups, the children sleeping in the nursery, their faces soft with innocence, the dinner party, all candlelight and conversation, the carriage ride home through empty streets. Each memory floats past like a leaf on a stream, observed but not grasped, present but already fading. You think about the woman you were today, the wife, the mother, the hostess, the ornament. You wore her like a costume, performed her like a role in a play. But here in the darkness, that woman dissolves. Here there is only you, formless and free, drifting toward dreams. Historians still debate what Victorian women dreamed about. Their diaries rarely mention such private matters, and the inner life of sleep remains largely unrecorded. But you know what you dream about. You dream about open spaces, fields stretching to the horizon, roads leading nowhere in particular, rooms without walls and days without schedules. You dream about speaking your mind without consequence. You dream about being seen. Perhaps tonight you will dream of the future. Perhaps you will see your daughter grown, walking through a world that has changed in ways you cannot imagine. Perhaps you will see women voting, women working, women living lives that are fully their own. Perhaps you will see the fire that burns inside you passed down through generations, growing brighter with each passing year. Or perhaps you will dream of nothing at all, just darkness and rest and the deep peace that comes from surrendering at last. The wind rises outside, rattling the window panes gently, then falling silent again. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks steadily, each second carrying you further from the day that has ended, closer to the day that will come. But that is tomorrow. Tomorrow can wait. The fire in the grate has burned down to embers now, glowing faintly orange in the darkness. You can feel its distant warmth, a memory of heat rather than heat itself. The room is cooling, but you are safe beneath the blankets, wrapped in layers of wool and cotton and the particular comfort of your own bed. Your breathing slows, your heartbeat steadies. The tension that has lived in your shoulders all day begins, finally, to release. You have walked through a world of rules today. Rules about how to dress and how to speak. Rules about where to go and whom to see. Rules about what to think and what to feel. So many rules, written by hands that were not yours, enforced by voices that did not ask your permission. You have followed them, as you always do. You have performed your part in the endless play of respectability. But now the curtain has fallen. Now the stage is dark. Now there is only you, lying in the quiet, letting the day dissolve. The women who will come after you will inherit some of these rules, and they will break some of them, slowly, imperfectly, one small rebellion at a time. The world will change. You may not live to see it, but the seeds are already planted, deep in the soil of history, waiting for the right moment to bloom. For now, there is only rest. Your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts growing soft and distant. The house settles around you, old timbers sighing in the darkness. Somewhere far away, a church bell chimes a single note, then falls silent. The world is sleeping. London is sleeping. Even the fog seems to rest, hanging still and quiet over the empty streets. You have carried so much today. The weight of expectation, the pressure of performance, the endless, exhausting labor of being a woman in a world that was not made for you. But you do not have to carry it now. Now you can set it down. Now you can be still. The embers glow. The darkness holds you. The night asks nothing of you but surrender. You think of your children, safe in their beds upstairs. You think of the women who fought before you, and the women who will fight after. You think of the fire inside you, banked but not extinguished, waiting for a world that is not yet ready to let it burn. And then you stop thinking altogether. Sleep comes softly, like a hand smoothing the hair from your forehead. It comes gently, like a voice whispering that you have done enough, that you are enough, that you can rest now. It comes slowly, like a tide rising in the darkness, lifting you free of the day and carrying you somewhere safe and warm and far away. The rules cannot follow you here. The walls cannot contain you. In dreams, you are boundless. The fire dies to ash. The clock ticks on. The long night holds you in its quiet arms. Sleep well. The world is changing. Slowly, surely. And you have played your part. Rest now, as countless women have rested before you, carrying their secret fires through the darkness. Tomorrow will come, with all its rules and demands. But tonight, you are free. Sweet dreams.